Well, hello everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your morning, evening, afternoon to join us. It's great to see a lot of familiar names and now seeing familiar faces as the videos come on. It's always really cool to sort of be able to see everyone together. For those of you who haven't met me or who don't know who I am, my name is Brandon Kirby, and I am the Director of Marketing and Admissions for Rotterdam School of Management, Erasmus University. And on behalf of myself, the entire admissions team, I'd like to welcome you all to the admitted and offered students to a special session that we're doing just for you all, which is around personal leadership development. And this is a topic that has always been well received. And we've had a lot of requests from the cohort, from you all, to say, hey, what can we do while we're waiting for classes to start? You know, what things can we be working on? And so working together with who I'm about to introduce you to here in just a moment, we developed this program to give you a little bit of a taste of what PLD is going to be like, to introduce you to a face that will become very familiar to you next year when you start the program with us. But it's a good sort of way to ease in, to start being in the mentality of doing an MBA. Just a few housekeeping issues here. This will be, what's the word I'm looking for? Interactive. I know that Sofya has something you'll need your phone for, so I'm sure everyone always keeps their phone beside them anyway, but just in case you decided to leave it on the other side of the room, you'll definitely need it, where she'll want you to log into a poll and share some thoughts. There will be a moment later on in the session where we'll actually put you guys in breakout rooms, which I know might be a little scary since maybe you don't know each other, but it's time to go ahead and start breaking the ice. And we'll give you some clear instructions for that. And it's more just for you to think and to chat and to get to know one another around a particular topic. So we have that. You're welcome to ask questions throughout the session. I just ask that you put it in the chat room. We're expecting over 100 people, and we're creeping up to about almost 90 people in the room already. So if you do have questions, please ask them throughout the presentation. You don't have to wait till the end. I'm going to be acting as the moderator, so bringing in those questions to the conversation as best I can. And then, of course, if need be, using some time at the end for a Q&A if we are unable to address them as we go along. At the very end, I'll have a very brief, some updates about the program and everything else. Nothing major, nothing different than anything that I've shared before, so don't think there's some crazy big surprise at the end, but just sharing some updates from our side. Other than that, I'm just making sure I've hit everything. Got that. I think that's it. If you're not on mute, go ahead and mute yourself. As much as I'd love to hear from you, if we have 90 people with mics on, it's going to get a little crazy. Okay. So I suppose it's probably a good time for me to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Sofya Isaakyan, who I had to really work. Yeah, I got the 2 thumbs up. Okay, I worked really hard on that. Who is joining us today from across town, so to speak, since we're all working remotely at the moment. And she's developed a presentation for you all. She was the one behind the survey that you received. She's going to share some results of that survey. Also, what does it even mean? Why do we have you do that survey? Give you some insights into the PLD program, some things you can think about before you even begin the program. So I'm really excited to sit back and sort of watch the show a little bit. I'm going to put myself on mute. I'm around. I'll be the one who will be moderating. If you have questions, I'll be bringing that into the discussion. But Sofya, otherwise, I'll hand it over to you, let you share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Brandon. Hello, everyone. Very nice to meet you all. I'm typically very excited in the beginning of January when we meet our MBA students, and now actually we have a chance to meet you already now. So I'm actually also myself really looking forward to today's session. And yes, as Brandon mentioned, I'm an assistant professor at the Department of Organization and Personnel Management, and I will be coordinating the Personal Leadership Development course. And today, during today's session, I would like to provide you with an overview of what actually we do within this course, and to, of course, also answer any questions that you might have about the personal leadership development. So let's get started. And what I'm going to do now, I will share my screen. So, yes. And yeah, in order to get started, I think it would be nice if I would provide you with some general information about myself, so you also know what is my background and what actually I'm doing within the RSM. And I think one thing that you need to keep in mind that RSM is very international. And it's not only that your MBA colleagues will be from different countries, but also our faculty members, they also come from different countries. And I'm not an exception. I am actually, okay, we can get started. I am originally from Armenia, but I grew up in Russia. And I lived there most of my life. And about 10 years ago, I actually moved to the Netherlands in order to do my master degree here. And I did it in Maastricht University. And after that, before joining academia, I was working in industry. And I personally really appreciate this experience because I think this is something which helped me not only during my PhD, but I think it is extremely helpful when I do teaching, because then for me, it's always easy to connect it to some of the experiences which I had. And in particular, what I was doing, I was working as a consultant for the Center for Creative Leadership, where I was responsible for evaluation of various leadership development programs and basically providing suggestions on how these programs could be improved and what are the potential things that could be used within these programs. And another thing which I did before joining the academia, I was working in recruitment. I was working for Japan Tobacco International, and I was responsible for international recruitment there. After that, I decided to go back to university and to do my PhD. And for 4 years, I did my PhD at Maastricht University in the business faculty. And on this picture, you can see I look extremely happy because this was the day of my defense. And yeah, after Maastricht, I moved to Rotterdam and I started working as an assistant professor at the Department of Organization and Personnel Management. So yeah, here we are. And this is actually how our Bale buildings looks like from outside. So I really hope that very soon you will all come here and see the building. And I think what is important to mention here is why actually I'm teaching PLD, why I'm the person who is coordinating the course. And with that regard, I would like to mention different ways in which I'm related to leadership. So first of all, I'm actually teaching leadership. I'm a leadership professor and I'm teaching leadership across different levels. So I'm teaching leadership to bachelor students. So every year I have about 600 students whom I need to motivate, inspire, encourage, and it's quite an experience when you give lecture to 600 students, but at the same time, yeah, this is the moment when you actually feel that you really need to use your leadership skills, especially things like charismatic leadership, I would say. And then next to academia, I'm still continuing working as a leadership consultant. So I'm working on various consultancy projects which are related to different aspects of leadership. I'm also supervising, I have research and teaching assistants, and I'm basically managing their work. I'm managing the work of my master's thesis students. And finally, and the most importantly for today's session, I'm the PLD leader. I'm going to coordinate the course, and there are many new things that we're actually developing for the upcoming year, and I will be more than happy to share those experiences and those ideas with you. In order to get started, I would like to provide you with a general agenda. So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about the PLD content. So basically, we're going to discuss the topics that we address within the personal leadership development course. Then we're going to talk about the process, in particular, how exactly we do it. And in the process, as well as at the end of the session, as Brandon mentioned, we're going to answer your questions. So, yeah. I think we can get started. And as I said, we're going to start with the content. And in order to do so, I'm actually very curious to see how you perceive leadership and what, in your opinion, effective leadership means. And for that, I would like to ask you to go to menti.com and use the following code. And once you are there, please type in 3 words that you associate with effective leadership. And my advice to you, don't think too much. Just write down the 3 words which first come to your mind, because this is really about the general perception that you have about leadership. So let's, 364046. And okay, I see the first responses are already coming.
So just to make sure, it's 38, 40, 46. We have some people who can't log in. I'm going to put it right there for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Now they're starting.
Okay, here it's coming. So at 10, we're going to see the cloud of leadership which exists within our group, right? So let's see what we see here: visionary, inspiring, vision, inspiration, guidance, courage, help, happiness, communication. Actually, very positive words, right? So responsibility, action, teamwork, empathy, enabling, motivation. Compassion, example, okay. It's nice because here you can see that when you look at this cloud, what is interesting here, there are clearly some things that I shared by many of you, right? So we can see that apparently many people went for inspiring, because here we see inspiring, inspire, inspiration. For example, there was also vision, right? So there are certain things which are similar, but at the same time, of course, there are certain unique things. And those differences, they come because of the differences in experiences that you had, because of differences in culture in which you work, because of the differences that you had in terms of the organization in which you worked. And in that regard, there is no one golden solution, right, of what effective leadership is. But what we can see here, that many people, they actually perceive leadership in a different way. There are some similarities. At the same time, there are some differences. And the important thing to keep in mind that actually, for some of you, certain things can be much more important in terms of the way you lead people as compared to other people, because certain things would be much more closely related to the values that you have, to the identity that you have. So here, but at the same time, I think if I would try to organize this cloud and to provide to it some structure, most likely what we're going to see, let me go back to the slides. What we're going to see, we would actually end up with those factors, right? And let me tell you about this model. So in order to organize your thoughts and all the ideas that you provided, I'm going to use the RSM leadership model. And this is the model that actually we are using within the PLD course, but this is also the model which is used within RSM across different levels. And what is important here, as you can see, we have a compass here. And the reason for that is that when we present the leadership model, we use the compass metaphor. And I'm going to tell you why this is the case in a minute. But before that, I would like to provide you with some general description of different elements. And in the follow-up slides, I'm going to provide you with a more in-depth description of each aspect. So the core part of the compass, or the core part of the model, is identity. Identity is about who you are, what is important to you, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. And within the PLD course, this is going to be one of the central elements that we're going to discuss, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to make sure that actually you raise your self-awareness, that you really understand what are your strong points and what are the areas that you can potentially develop. And then what we also have, we have our core 4 competences. And the first one is related to behaviors which focus on task-oriented leadership. Then the next one is about behaviors which focus on relation-oriented leadership, change-oriented leaderships, and ethic-oriented leadership. And what is important here, right, going back to the idea of compass, is that when you are a leader, you need to navigate in a very complex world. And in this complex world, it's very important to find a balance. To find a balance also in terms of these different behaviors that you need to display. And what we know from the decades of research on leadership is that actually there is no one effective leadership style, right? But at the same time, the most effective leaders are the ones who are adaptive. And in order to be adaptive, you actually need to find a balance between these 4 competences, right? So you need to know, okay, this is the situation when I need to focus on task-related things, or this is the situation when actually I need to focus more on relations which exist within my team. So with that regard, what we're gonna do, we're gonna make sure that within the PLD course, it's not that you just simply develop those competences, but you also know when you need to use which competences, right? To make sure that you are more adaptive, to make sure that you really know how to navigate in this complex world. Good. So as a next step, I would like to provide you with a more detailed description of each element, because these are the elements that actually eventually we're going to discuss within the PLD course, because the whole PLD course is based on this model. And actually within the PLD course, we're going to address these different behaviors. And in order to do so, I'm going to actually talk also about the survey that you have completed. And you all now have a score for each element of the model, and I'm going to provide you with some more detailed information about these elements. In order to do so, I have another short task or short exercise for you. So I would like to ask you to write down statements which start with I am. And please continue. You can continue with a noun. You can continue with an adjective. It's up to you, but write down maybe 3 or 5 statements where you basically say I am and continue. And you can continue the way you want. So I am a father, I am a professor, I am anything else, whatever comes to your mind. So yeah, I will give you half minute to do it. Okay, I guess you already have 2, 3, or maybe 5 statements. So if you look at the things that you wrote down, these are the elements of your identity which are the most prominent ones. So let's maybe ask, is there anyone who would like to share what he or she wrote down in terms of the statements? You can raise your hand virtually and Brandon will see it.
Scrolling down, looking for a brave soul. Who wants to be the first one? Okay, Yoko, go for it.
I wrote down several like nouns and also adjectives. Then I wrote I am a consultant. And also for the adjective, I wrote down I am energetic.
Okay, so what does it tell us? It tells us that if one of the first things that you wrote in your list that you are I'm a consultant, it means that the fact that you are a consultant, this is something which is very important part of your identity, something which is very prominent. So this is a very simple exercise, but at the same time here, what we can see that this is something which comes first to your mind, apparently, and maybe some other elements of your identity are still equally important, but at the same time, this is something which is very important part of who you are, right? Is there anyone else who would like to share?
Yes, we have, I think, probably 3 other people that I've been able to pull out. Waleed, you're next, and then Charles, and then Jackson. So Waleed, go for it.
So what I've written is, firstly, I just wrote like I'm a salesperson. Like you said, it's my profession. Apart from that, I wrote that I'm a team player. And one other thing that I wrote is that I'm honest. Like,
This is interesting, right? So again, so what we can see here that for you, your profession, right, your occupation, it's something which is very important to who you are. Then the fact that you are a team player, so I can imagine that I'm sure that there are many other people in the room for whom working in a team and being effective in a team and being a good team player is important, but still maybe other people didn't write it down because it's important, but it's maybe not as important as it is important to you. So it's very likely that this is something which is closely related to your values. And finally, that you are honest. So this is also something which again shows that this is an important part of your identity, right? So maybe, Brandon, we can have one more person.
Okay, so we'll do Charles. I think Charles was the 3rd in line, and for the others, don't worry, there'll be other opportunities. So let's go to Charles.
Yeah, thank you. Hi. So what I wrote first is I'm a human in this complex world. So this is back to the complexity which you talked about. I am a life learner, and that's it, I guess, what I wrote.
But this is also interesting, right? So this is the way you look at yourself. It's really having rather this helicopter view, right, where you look at yourself as part of the bigger world and what's your role in it. And I think one of the important things that we're going to do within the MBA is actually trying to motivate you to think about, okay, what is your role, not just within your team, what is your role, not just within your organization, but maybe actually partly what is your role overall within the society, what is the difference that you can make within the society, because one of the things that we focus at RSM is actually being a force for positive change. So being a human, this is something which is, I found it very nice that you thought in that way, right? And then I think it's a life learn. So this is actually indicates that it's very important for you to actually keep on learning and to actually focus, perceive different experiences as an opportunity to learn. So overall, we can of course continue this, but this whole exercise, if I go back to the slides, this whole exercise was about identity part, right? So again, I'm not telling you that if you didn't mention certain things that it means that you are not good at it or this is not important to you, but still the things that you mentioned, if you look at your list, these are the things which are apparently relevant to who you are, what matters to you, what values you have. And it's also related to your strengths and maybe also potentially weaknesses, right? So in that sense, when we talk about identity, it's all about understanding who you are, right? So one of you actually, as you mentioned, you wrote that you are honest, and this is one of the strengths that you have, and it's very important that you actually also understand and you are aware of this strength. Then identity, it's also about understanding how your words and actions impact other people. And a very important part of identity, it's actually understanding your leadership potential. So the question here is whether you feel comfortable to write down, I am a leader, or I'm an effective leader. And within the PLD, again, linking it back to PLD, what we're going to do, we're going to make sure that by the end of the program, you feel comfortable to write down that statement, right? And by saying a leader, here we mean many different things, because being an effective leader, it's not just simply about leading a team of people, but being a leader is being responsible. Being a leader, it's about also managing yourself, finding a work-life balance, setting up the priorities both in life and at work, and actually committing to those priorities. And you all got a score on identity if you look back at your survey, results. And just to give you a reference point, here what I can show you is that actually 3.9, it's your group average. So I calculated the score from all your responses, and the average of the current MBA batch is 4.1. So these are the average scores. And another very important thing that I want you to keep in mind, that the score that you have now, this score is based on your self-assessment. And believe me, it's very likely that the score that other people would give you would be different from the way you evaluate yourself. And this is one of the first things that we're going to do within the MBA program. We're going to conduct a 360-degree assessment where we will ask you to evaluate yourself on those dimensions. And then what we're going to do, we're going to approach people who know you well, and we're going to ask them to evaluate you. And these are often the aha moments when actually you realize that, okay, the way I see myself is quite different from the way others see me, right? And this is about raising your self-awareness. And one thing which I can tell you, that the self-awareness is a cornerstone of leadership development. Because without having the self-awareness, it's very hard to actually understand the need that you need to focus on certain developmental areas. And one thing that we're going to do throughout the MBA program, it's actually keep on providing you with this other perspective. So it's not going to be just at the beginning and at the end of the program, but within each term, what we're going to do, we're going to keep on conducting 360-degree assessments when actually your team members, your peers are going to evaluate you. And I'm going to send you out detailed reports on how others evaluate you and how you evaluate yourself on the same dimensions. And then later on, we're going to provide you with opportunities to meet with your team members and actually to discuss it, right? So, okay, you will see that you got 3.5 on, for example, task-related leadership. And of course, and for example, you evaluated yourself with a 4.2, let's say. So you see there is a big gap between the way you evaluate yourself and the way others evaluate you. So what we're going to make sure that you're going to have opportunities to talk to your peers, to hear why exactly they evaluated you the way they evaluated you, what are the things that you need to focus on, and that will be an idea so that at the end of term one, you're going to get a detailed feedback, but also during term one, we're going to provide you with different simulations where you're also going to get feedback. And then you're going to develop a plan of how you're going to address certain points for development in the follow-up term. And I'm going to support you in that process. You're going to have your personal coaches who are going to support you in that process. But at the very end, I can do a lot, your career coaches can do a lot, but it's all going to depend on you. Because what we want you to do, we want you to start actually doing things differently, right? So, and it's very important that you take this feedback seriously, because from this feedback, you can actually really learn and to identify things that you can change. Good.
Sofya, I have a quick question from the chat, just asking if that class average from MBA 21, was that before taking everything, or was that kind of at the end of the program, this average that we're looking at?
This was at the beginning of the program.
Okay, so very similar to the group we have here now, so to speak, so before the program starts.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
great.
exactly. And I can tell you also one interesting thing. What might also happen is that you might notice that actually your score goes down instead of going up. And one of the reasons, there are basically two reasons for that. The first reason is that during the process, you're going to understand actually, for example, if we move to task-oriented leadership, you're going to understand that what you thought about yourself in terms of task-oriented leadership, actually you get a much better understanding what it is to be effective in terms of managing task-related things, right? So the better understanding you get about certain things, about the way certain things need to be done, the more you might realize that actually I'm not that good in that. That is one thing. So the better you understand the concept, the better awareness you're going to have about how good you are in something. This is one thing. And another thing, which I already want to prepare you now, you need to keep in mind that the moment you start trying out new things, your performance is going to go down. This is normal because you're going to experiment. You're going to do new things. And this is why typically, even if you take any leadership development program or training, the best moment to measure the effectiveness of the training in terms of change in the behavior, it is actually 2 to 4 months after the training. Because in the first 2 months, most likely, if you're really going to try to do something differently, you're going to fail, because for you, it's going to be hard because you need to develop new behavioral patterns. So this is also something that you need to keep in mind, that it might be the case that actually you will see that at the beginning, your performance goes down, but then after 2 months, you will see a growth. You will see that actually you start doing things much more effectively and that you actually feel much more comfortable to display new types of behaviors. Good. So now if we move to the next element of our model, right? So here we're going to talk about task-oriented leadership. And task-oriented leadership it's about, on the one hand, it's a lot about coordinating team processes, making sure that team members within your team, they openly share information, they coordinate their processes, they all share a similar goal and they are aware of this goal. At the same time, it's also about setting up priorities, both in life and at work, and also committing to those priorities. And believe me that within the MBA program, this is going to be very challenging, because you're going to be in a new country, you're going to be working with new people. At the same time, you're going to be working on multiple projects, on multiple courses, and you're going to work with, you're going to have a very diverse team. So in that sense, it will be very important for you to also take care of yourself, to be resilient, to still have this work-life balance. And again, you can look at your score. Here, again, we have the score from your group and from the MBA class average. But what we're going to do within the program, again, we're going to provide you with many opportunities to become more effective in terms of task-oriented leadership, right? So again, we're going to do simulations when you will realize how effective you are in terms of the way you share information, in terms of the way how you coordinate different processes. And one thing which I'm going to promise you, that we're going to really push you out of your comfort zone. So we're going to make sure that you feel very uncomfortable, but still in a very safe environment. Because again, these are the situations in which you learn. So in that sense, we're really going to push you. We're really going to put you in crisis situations, because also in crisis situations, all your natural behavioral patterns, they come out. So this is why be ready for a challenge. But at the same time, this is a perfect setup to go out of your comfort zone, because it's going to be this learning setup where you hopefully will feel comfortable to experiment, to try out new things. Good. Let's move to the next one, a relation-oriented leadership. And I would especially like to focus on this aspect of leadership, because this is something which is going to be extremely relevant for you within your MBA program. Just because, as I already mentioned, you're going to work with people who have different working style, different personalities, different experiences, different specializations, different approaches in terms of how they do their work. So there are going to be clashes, there are going to be conflicts. Some people are more dominant, other people are less dominant. So with that regard, you will really need to learn how to connect to other people, how listen to other people, how to make sure that everyone is included and you don't exclude some of the members who are maybe not as proactive as other members. And also how to disagree and how to make sure that other people feel comfortable to disagree. So that's why whatever we discuss within this model, it's not just simply about how you're going to act the moment you finish your MBA with your team, but you're going to need all these competences and skills during the MBA, the moment you work with people who come from different cultures, from different backgrounds. And again, you can look at your score, and I would like to remind you again that at this point you look at the way you evaluate yourself, but it's going to be much more insightful the moment you also get how others evaluate you. Okay, change-oriented leadership. Change-oriented leadership, it's about being open to and initiating changes. Change-oriented leadership, it's about motivating and inspiring other people by giving a personal example, right? And also change-oriented leadership, it's about how to speak up. And especially if you are planning to stay in the Netherlands after your MBA, then I can tell you that here within the Netherlands, people really appreciate when you openly share your ideas, when you openly speak up with different concerns that you have, with different suggestions that you have, and that you are actually open to reconsidering and initiating certain changes within the procedures and practices which exist. So, of course, again, within the MBA program, you will have opportunities to engage in change-oriented leadership. One example for that would be, for example, you're going to work on the LMP project, Leaving the Management project, and it's very likely that companies are going to provide you with a project where you will need to develop something new, where you will need to develop certain practices, procedures, products which already exist within organization. And as I mentioned earlier, RSM's motto is basically force for positive change. So in that regard, we really want you to not just make sure that things run smooth, but always try to think about the ways how you can do things better. And finally, ethics-oriented leadership. This is about showing integrity. This is about being able to take responsibilities for failures. This is about showing humility. And what we want you to do, again, is not to be self-focused, but to really care about other people. And this can be your team members. This can be your organization. This can be the society in general. So again, the mindset that we want to have in our MBA students is that when they graduate, that of course we want to see their successes, we want to see their achievements, but at the same time we also really want to see that they are making a difference also for other people. So again, you can see your score, you can check your score, and here you can see the scores from your group and from the MBA 21 class average. And again, all these aspects of leadership, they're going to be relevant throughout of your MBA program, because also when you're going to work with other people, I think for you it will be very important to really show that you care not just about the final outcome that, for example, you're going to have within your team, but you also care that people within your team, they actually feel comfortable to work with you, that they are satisfied with the overall process and they are ready to continue working with you, and other related things.
Sofya, we have a few questions I might like to bring in. I think it's kind of a natural pause here. The first one kind of goes back, you were mentioning doing the 360 evaluations, probably a pretty quick question to answer. Does that 360, when the students do it in the program, does that happen just with those in the cohort, or do they also invite outside colleagues and friends to participate in that 360 of each person?
Mm-hmm. So during the program, at the beginning of the program, we're going to ask people who know you, right? But during the program, you're going to get feedback from your peers only. And the reason for that is that, of course, we might still ask your family and friends whether they see any differences in you, but at the same time, your team members are going to be the ones who are going to be in a regular contact with you, basically on daily basis. That's why still the most precise feedback that you're going to get in this situation is going to be the feedback from your peers. And yeah, as I said, you're going to get both quantitative feedback, so you're going to get scores, and the feedback is going to be much more elaborate than what we are doing here, because here I just presented you with the overall 5 elements of the model, while within this 360-degree assessment during the program, you're going to get feedback on very specific behaviors. For example, this person initiates how we're going to approach the task. This person shows genuine concern for other members within the team. This person speaks up with constructive ideas and suggestions for concern. So with that regard, the way I designed the 360 assessment within the program, right, is in a way that you can really get feedback on very specific behaviors, so that later on you also feel more comfortable to discuss these things with your peers as well as with your coach, because this is the idea, what I always push our MBA students to do after they get feedback from their peers, to take this feedback, to go to the coach and develop a plan how the student is going to address those areas for development in the next term. And also another thing which I always encourage our MBAs to do, at the beginning of a next term, openly tell their team that, for example, guys, I'm typically very dominant, so I will try to take a step back and to let other people to participate more. So this is also something which is, I think, very fair to do towards your team members, because then your team members are going to understand, okay, why do you behave the way you behave? And it's not that you are just lazy or you don't want to contribute, but actually you are really trying to be less dominant. And with that regard, you may also ask your team members to keep on giving you feedback on how you are doing on a certain thing.
That's great. One other quick one before we move on. They're kind of tied together. There is a question about some recommended reading, which we can maybe address towards the end of the presentation. But there was a kind of a comment, 2 of them kind of similar. One of them was from Yoko, who says, I'd be interested to see the trend of self-scoring between, say, between genders, between males or females, or between different nationalities or cultures. And then Jose Luis is saying, it'd be interesting to see or analyze if the world context, are things changing as far as being self-conscious with the current pandemic? In other words, are people more self-aware than they have been in the past? I don't know if there's really how much you can comment to that, but do we or have we seen trends, or do we look at kind of underneath these numbers to look at subsets of, okay, does someone from Asia, how do they compare against other Asians, or how does an Asian compare to someone from Latin America? How would you react to that?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So regarding gender differences, there was some studies which show that on average, female they would evaluate themselves, they would provide themselves lower self-evaluations as compared to male people who evaluate themselves. So this is in terms of the gender. I don't remember the exact detail, but basically one of the things I remember, there was a study which basically showed that when evaluated by others, then actually male leaders would be evaluated often as good as female leaders when it is just purely others evaluations. When it is self-evaluations, then often female leaders would evaluate themselves worse than the way male leaders would evaluate themselves. So if you are interested, I can find that paper. I don't remember author I don't have it on the top of my head, but I can find the paper and share it. And regarding cultural differences, to be honest, I think there are several things. So one thing, for example, if we talk about Asian students, then what I noticed that basically Asian students on average, they would give higher ratings, and they would also often have less deviation between the ratings that they give to different members within the team. That would be one thing. And the other thing which I also noticed, but this is more the difference between, let's say, I would say Europeans and Americans, is that, for example, in Europe, people often if you take, for example, a scale from 1 to 10, people would be much less inclined to give a 9 or 10. For European people, if something is very good, they would rather give a 8, and they think, okay, this is very good. While in the US, what you can see that people are much more inclined to give more extreme ratings. So they would be much more, if they really liked something, they would give 9 or 10. While if the European person liked it to the same extent, the person would give an 8. So these are the things that, of course, we need to keep in mind. But at the same time, I will be honest with you, we do not control for it when we provide you with the feedback, just because it's still, this is the feedback that is given within your team by your team members. The only thing that we try to do within the surveys, we would try to give a clear description of what 1 means, what 2 means, what 3 means, what 4 means, what 5 means. But at the same time, and there are going to be cultural differences. And in order to address those things, right, this is exactly the reason why we want to make sure that later on you still discuss this feedback with your team. Because otherwise, when you just look at the numbers, then of course, for you, sometimes it's hard to make sense of it. But then the moment you start talking to a person, then for you, it's much better, much easier to understand, okay, what are the things that I need to focus on and why did this person give me a 3 or 4? And again, you're not going to know what each person within the team gave you, but you're going to get an average score from all the team members that you have.
And one last one, just a yes or no, because I know you need to keep moving. During the program, will self-evaluations be compared to evaluation by peers? So in other words, I fill out my own evaluation, other people are doing evaluations of me. Are we, we're sharing that, right? So I can sort of compare and contrast what I think my weaknesses are versus, do people see that in me as well? So are we sharing amongst each other?
Yeah, so what you're going to do, you're going to get your self-evaluation and how you evaluated by others, while other team members, they're going to get only their self-evaluation and the way they were evaluated by others. Okay, great. I know in some teams, they would openly sit and openly share their numbers. And I think generally, this is fine. And especially, I think this also indicates a high level of trust within the team, but I will not send it around. I will not send the total scores within each team to everyone. So each person is going to get his or her own self-evaluation and the way he or she is evaluated by other team members.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. Good. Let's move on. And I think at this point, it would be really nice because we talked a lot about leadership, and I can imagine that the moment I was presenting you the model, you were already thinking about some of the experiences that you had. And I think it would be very nice if you have a chance to get to know each other and to get to know what kind of experiences other people have. So this is why what we're going to do, we're going to put you in breakout rooms for 10 minutes. And within these 10 minutes, what I would like to ask you to do is to introduce yourself and briefly tell about your leadership experience, about your preferred leadership style, and your leadership challenge. And the reason why we're doing this is, on the one hand, again, to give you a chance to get to know some of your potential future MBA colleagues, but also I think what is going to be a very important part of the PLD course is actually learning from each other, because you have so much experience and all of you can really learn from each other's experiences. So this is why I think it would be a good way to actually provide you with this opportunity to already start sharing some of your experiences. And I might join some of your breakout rooms, so don't be surprised if at one point I appeared there. But yeah, you're going to have 10 minutes. And yeah, just share your experiences, talk about your leadership experience, your preferred leadership style, and the key leadership challenge that you have. And yeah, maybe, Brandon, before we put everyone into breakout rooms, in case someone has questions related to this, if everything is clear.
Yes. Any questions from the group? No? Okay, so I'm going to put everyone into a breakout room here. It'll probably be, I don't know, 3 or 4 participants per room, perhaps. And we'll have you there for around 10 minutes. I'll give you a 2-minute warning. For any of the co-hosts, those are all different RSM folk in the admissions team. You can feel free to stay, but obviously it's not for us to share. We want everyone else to do so. So if you want to back yourself out and kind of come back into the general room, feel free. But I'm going to go ahead and divide people up, and we'll see you in 10 minutes.
So, yeah, I think one thing which I would like to ask, actually, now you had a chance to talk to some of your potential future MBA colleagues. And actually, I'm curious to hear, how did the discussion go? So, for example, when you were talking about your experiences, or for example, when you were talking about your preferred style or challenge, did you notice some differences, or did you observe actually some similarities in the experience that you have, or maybe the challenges that you face? So yeah, maybe one or two people could share how their discussion went.
Yeah, so if someone wants to raise their hand, I can call on you. Hopefully I pronounce your name properly, because I'm still learning everyone's names. It can be challenging, especially if it's like a shortened name. No one is being brave so far.
I see Jose, I think, raised a hand virtually.
Yeah, there it is. Jose Luis, go for it.
Okay, yes. So what we found is that even though we might be from different countries or different roles, we're pretty much very similar in our challenges. I mean, and maybe we were kind of afraid of sharing that, in the first point of contact between. But after developing the conversation, we would see that, for example, we might be, I don't know, afraid of public speaking, or maybe our leadership style would relate to leading by example. Also, that maybe we would be pretty straightforward about jumping into conclusions. So maybe we'd like to step back to let other people participate. So yeah, that's what we noted in our session.
Thank you. It's interesting, right? So indeed, although you have so many different cultures, right, within one team, but still you saw a lot of similarities. And this is also something which I hear from some of our MBAs, that the more they go through the program, the more actually the interesting thing that they said that the culture doesn't matter. It still matters, of course, but the more they start saying it's really about the person, it's really about the experience that the person has, it's really about some of the values that the person shares. So at the same time, again, depending on what experience you have, if you had a very extreme experience of a cultural clash, then of course you might say that, okay, it really matters, but there are definitely things which unite you all, right? So good. Anyone else?
Yeah, we have Laura here, and which is good. We have about 10 to 12 minutes left. So Laura, go ahead with your comments, please.
Okay, so just like the other team, we're all from different backgrounds, but one thing was similar, and that's that our leadership style is the relationship oriented leadership style. And it's interesting because though we are all females, maybe that has an impact on the results, but it's just interesting that we all have similar leadership style. And for most of us, the leadership style we need to work on or improve on is the task and change-oriented leadership style.
Thank you. And this is also interesting. So I think what is still interesting, because the way you discussed it, it seemed that you had very similar leadership styles, right? Preferred leadership styles. But I think if you would be given a chance to start working together, you might see that actually the way you implement this leadership style might be very different. Or sometimes what also happens, you might have an idea, okay, this is the way leadership should be, but the moment you start working, you realize that for you, for example, it's actually very hard to do certain things, just because sometimes you are lacking patience, because you are used to work very fast, and then you see that you have a team member who has a different approach. So, but in that regard, indeed, I think it's also nice to see that also in your case, you actually, although again, you come from different backgrounds, but at the same time, you still had certain similarities in the preferred leadership style. Great. One thing which I can promise that over the MBA program, you're going to have a lot of opportunities to share your experiences with each other, with the rest of the group. And at this point, we need to continue because I still would like to tell you more about the process, right? About how exactly we do things within the program. And one thing, before I move to the process, one thing which I want to make clear is that PLD is a very special course. And it is special because compared to other courses which run, for example, just one term, PLD is the course which runs the entire year, from January till December. And in that regard, what I'm going to do within the course is making sure that the PLD does not simply happen, I don't know, within 3-hour sessions that we're going to have, but the PLD also happens the moment you leave the room. So that the PLD is integrated with all the other courses, with all the other projects that you do, that actually you practice your leadership, not just again within these 3-hour sessions that we have, that you keep on practicing your leadership throughout the program. So how exactly we're going to do it? So a PLD is very much about action learning. And what I mean by action learning is that actually the reason for that is that you retain 10% of what you read, 20% of what you hear, 30% of what you see, 50% of what you see and hear, and 70% of what you say and do. This is why within the PLD course, we're going to keep on pushing you to do things and to share your insights, to get feedback on that. And again, as I mentioned already, we're going to put you out of your comfort zone. We're going to constantly put you in a challenging situations where all your behavioral, natural patterns are going to come out, right? And where we're going to push you to try out new things, to experiment with your behavior. And again, we discussed this. We're going to constantly provide you with feedback, and we're going to push you to engage in self-reflection in order to get insights about the things that you need to do differently and how exactly you're going to do it. So, as you can already see, I think, from the things that I have presented, the key thing of the PLD that it is very interactive. So I'm still going to provide you with some theories, but at the same time, it's not an organizational behavior course. We're still going to have an organizational behavior course where we're going to cover many theories. But the PLD, it's more about really making you to do things. And again, I might provide you with some theories just to explain you why certain things can be more effective than the others. But at the same time, it's really about making you to do things and making sure that you get a personal feedback. The way we're going to do it is that we're going to run 360-degree assessments. We discussed this a lot today. We're going to do different leadership simulations. We're going to do exercises, discussions. We're going to do, for example, also a network analysis where we're going to analyze relationships within your cohort, who is connected to whom, and how you may use your position within the network for different purposes. Then we're going to have real case studies. And again, we're going to make sure that the PLD is integrated in different courses, that you constantly connect PLD to the meetings that you have with your coach. So basically to make sure that the PLD is integrated with the rest of the program. Just to give you an idea of one of the things that we did this year. So at one point, basically when the whole COVID-19 situation happened, I realized that what our students really need and what is extremely relevant now is having a session on effective leadership in times of crisis. And for this session, I actually contacted our MBA alumni from last year, Yuta Taniguchi, who is the managing director of a family hotel, Senpokaku, in Japan. So Yuta, after doing his MBA, he went back to Japan to manage the family hotel, and the hotel actually exists already for 120 years. So you can imagine that some of the employees which work in Yuta's hotel, they actually know Yuta since the moment he was born. And what we did together with Yuta, actually, as you can imagine, that he was facing a lot of problems and issues because his hotel was closed for a year. And also there was an issue that the bank might not give him a loan, but he still managed not to fire any employees yet. So there were many, many problems that Yuta was facing. So together with Yuta, we actually turned his situation into a case, which we presented to our students, and then we asked students to provide their solutions to these challenges. We asked them to provide us with specific leadership practices that they would implement, taking into account the culture of the hotel and of the country where the hotel exists, right? And as well as to come up with specific business solutions. And in that regard, I think this was quite effective because on the one hand, students could work on a real case which was happening right now and get feedback from Yuta because Yuta joined all the sessions. But at the same time, Yuta used many ideas provided by the students in order to basically address those challenges. So, but this is just one of the examples what we do. To finalize it, one thing which I can say that leadership development is challenging, is tough, but at the same time, it's fun. And I really hope to see you all very soon in January. But I can imagine that there are still some questions, and I will be more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, we had a question that was put in chat, and it's funny because someone sent me a private message when I probably should have been more clear at the beginning. When I say raise your hand, I should have said raise your hand virtually because it's tough for me to see 100 screens. So if you raised your hand throughout the conversation today and I didn't call on you, I apologize. It's just I can't see everyone's screens. But there was a question along the lines from Yoko. Are the competencies and leadership style of a CEO to employees different? I'm trying to make sure I understand this. Are the competencies and leadership style of a CEO to employees or a leader in a small group different? So does the size of the organization, if I'm understanding the question correctly, does the size of the organization play a role in that?
Sure. I would say I think competences are the same in terms of having task-oriented, relational-oriented, change-oriented, ethics-oriented leadership. At the same time, the behaviors that you are going to display within those competences, they are going to be different, right? So, for example, showing change-oriented leadership when you are a CEO is quite different from showing change-oriented leadership when you are when you are a leader of 2 or 3 people, for example. So in that regard, for example, change-oriented leadership on a CEO level, there I think the changes that you're going to propose and introduce, they might be more grand and they might address bigger issues. At the same time, when you are a CEO, there is also a lot of politics which involved, right? Because the more we go in hierarchy, the more we have these political issues. At the same time, I think the way you coordinate the processes, then when you are a CEO, it's much more about keep on providing information to your employees, making sure that there is information flow. And at the same time, when you are a leader of a smaller team, then of course, information flow is important. But at the same time, when you are a leader of a smaller team, then for you, of course, it's much easier to have a stronger control over what happens within the team. Then you can directly participate in the coordination of the processes, right? So there are differences. I would still say the competences are the same in essence, but the behaviors that you display within the competence, this is something that might differ. And at the same time, I think what is also important to keep in mind that whatever behaviors you display, they will be very much also still driven by the identity that you have. That certain behaviors you will feel more comfortable to display than other behaviors just because of the way you are and who you are.
Yeah. So we have a couple questions, but I'm going to make this one the last one. And then if we didn't address your question, I'm looking at Ramon, who's asked a question about personalization or not. We'll be sure that we come back and address anything that we didn't get a chance to do live. But Eduardo was asking, I've never heard about network analysis. Could you expand on that, please?
Sure. So basically what we do with network analysis, we're going to ask you with whom from your group, for example, you regularly interact. And then at the end, what we're going to do, we're going to draw a map with many dots and each dot is going to be a person, and there are going to be many lines, and you will see there are going to be some central people, right? So this is something which is called broca, but we're going to provide you with more information about that. So we're going to see that we have some central people, we have some more peripheral people. At the same time, what might happen, it really depends on the dynamic within your group, that we might have a lot of interconnections, but at the same time, we might have a lot of separate groups. So for example, if there are separate groups, then it's very likely that do not interact much with each other, then those groups, they will have less connection between each other. So basically, network analysis is going to show you the way interactions happen within your group, and we're going to discuss how this applies to an organizational context and how different position within the network affects information that you get, information that you transfer, how is this relevant to your political, basically to politics within organizations. So this is the idea of network analysis.
That's great. Sofya, first off, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. Like I said, I knew we were super excited to have you. And I think it's great for everyone to see you before they show up in January. So first things first, thank you for putting this together. For those questions that, like I said, we have yet to answer in the chat, we'll be sure that we follow up with her and get those questions answered for you. Real quick, just because I know we all have places to be, work to go to, or beers to drink, depending on where you live in the moment. Just a couple housekeeping things for me. We're going to schedule another update session. I don't really have any updates right now, which is why we haven't done it. So for those of you who have been registered with us for a few months ago, we had an update session where we basically solicited questions from the group. It could have been anything about visa to housing to COVID, and we created a presentation sort of answering your questions. There haven't really been any updates. I know we've gotten some emails from some people asking or saying, oh, are we going to a blended approach or anything like that? There's been no change in our approach. We're still looking to do the 1.5 meter situation in class. So if or when, more likely if, not when, that changes, we'll communicate that with you guys. And we can have that conversation on what that means, if it means anything, meaning if it even happens. So I just wanted to say first, we've always been transparent with you all. We will continue to be transparent. So there's no updates yet to give in that regard because nothing has changed, but we will schedule another session to answer your questions if you have them. So that's one. Two, I know there are some questions about immigration services versus the registrar's office. They're the same thing. This year, they decided that they were going to also call themselves sort of immigration services. That is part of the registrar's department. My understanding is by the end of this month, they will be sending out some communication to you all to open up your personal folders to start uploading your documents. So don't stress. We're still way early in the process anyway, but I think there was some confusion by some people, and rightfully so, between what is the registrar, what is immigration services. It's the same thing. It's just immigration services is kind of a service out of the registrar's office. So hopefully that clears up a little confusion there. There is an interesting session coming up on July 16th, run by one of our professors called Stefan Giesner, and that is on the understanding loneliness and working during COVID. I just put the link in the chat if you're looking for another interesting webinar to kind of attend and listen to. This is also evidence-based and research-based, talking about understanding loneliness, especially working from home now. Should be an interesting topic. It's open to students, alums, and we're also making it available to you all as well. Other than that, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully this added some value to your day. I think this is a great example of what an MBA session is like. Typically, there's opportunity for more questions than today, so thank you for your patience for that. We look forward to seeing you in person. We look forward to seeing you soon in another virtual session. If you have any ideas for things that you would like to see before we start the program, let us know. You know, if you're really interested in learning to run a regression analysis beforehand, I'm sure we could make that happen. But if you have ideas, please share it with us, and we will do the best we can to try to assemble the people to make that content happen. Thank you to the admissions team also working behind the scenes to make sure this ran seamlessly. Have a great day, a great weekend, and we will look forward to communicating with you all very soon. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And be sure to copy and paste all the links before we close out the chat if you want to go to any of those sessions, because otherwise it disappears. So anyway.
There's the safe chat button. Thanks.
Yes. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful day. We'll speak soon. Bye-bye.